Stand at the foot of the Great Pyramid of Egypt and you feel very, very small. It rises higher than a 40-story building. It's built from more than 2 million blocks of stone, some of them heavier than a car. And here's the part that stops people cold. It was finished around 4,500 years ago. No cranes, no trucks, no engines of any kind, just people, the river, and an idea. So how on earth did they do it? This is the story of how a people with copper tools and rope built the most famous structures in the world. How we got here. First, let's clear something up. You may have heard wild ideas that the pyramids were built by aliens or by some lost magic. Let's be honest about why people say that. They look at something this enormous, this precise, this old, and they think, surely ordinary humans couldn't have done this. But they could, and they did. And the true story is far more impressive than any alien ever could be, because it's a story about what people can do when they work together, think carefully, and refuse to give up. Everything we're about to see, archaeologists have pieced together from the quarries, the tools, the ruined ramps, and even the lunchboxes of the workers themselves. It starts, like almost everything in Egypt, with the river. A pyramid is, before anything else, a mountain of stone. So the first question is, where did all that stone come from? Most of it came from right there. The builders quarried limestone from the ground just a few hundred steps from the building site. Workers would mark out a block in the rock, then cut around it using tools of copper and harder stones and wooden wedges. There's a clever trick here. Drive dry wooden wedges into a crack, soak them with water, and as the wood swells, it splits the stone along a clean line. Patience and water doing the work of a machine. But not all the stone was local. The smooth, gleaming outer casing was fine white limestone from across the river, and deep inside, the king's chamber was lined with granite, a stone so hard it can blunt steel, and that granite came from Aswan, nearly 500 miles to the south, which raises the next great question. How do you move a block of stone heavier than a car when the wheel and cart were barely used for this kind of work, and you have no machines at all? Two answers, the river and a beautifully simple piece of science. For the heavy granite coming from the south, the Egyptians used the Nile itself. They loaded blocks onto wooden barges and let the river carry them north, and they timed it for the flood season when the rising water reached closer to the building site than at any other time of year. The river wasn't just water, it was their highway. And on land, they dragged the blocks on wooden sledges. But here's the genius part. Dragging a heavy sledge across dry desert sand is brutal. The sand piles up in front and fights you every step. So the Egyptians poured water on the sand just ahead of the sledge. Damp sand is firm and smooth. It stops bunching up. We're not guessing about this. There's an ancient Egyptian painting that shows a worker doing exactly that. Pouring water in front of a sledge, hauling a giant statue. With wet sand, a team needed only about half as many people to pull the same weight. They had figured out, 4,000 years before physics class, how to beat friction. So you've got your block at the base of the pyramid. Now comes the hardest part, lifting it up. As the pyramid grows, the top gets higher and higher. How do you get a 2-ton block 100, 200, 300 feet into the air? The answer almost everyone agrees on is ramps. The builders raised great ramps of mud brick, rubble, and packed earth, and hauled the blocks up the slope on those same wet sand sledges. As the pyramid rose, the ramps rose with it. Now here's where we have to be honest, because good history admits what it doesn't know. We are not completely sure what shape those ramps were. Some think one long straight ramp climbing one face. Some think a ramp that spiraled around the outside like a winding road. Some think there were ramps inside the pyramid itself. The truth is, the ramps were taken apart when the work was done, so we're reading clues from what they left behind. But the principle, haul it up a slope, that part is solid. Sometimes the biggest achievements are built on the simplest ideas, repeated a million times. Now for the biggest myth of all. For a long time, people imagined the pyramids being built by enslaved people, driven by whips. Movies love that image, but the archaeology tells a different story, and it's wonderful. Just beside the pyramids, archaeologists found an entire town where the builders lived. They found bakeries that turned out bread by the thousands, and evidence of fish and meat and beer. These workers were fed and fed well, They were organized into teams with proud names. We know this because the crews painted their team names on the stones, tucked away where they thought no one would ever look. Names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkora. Builders having a laugh, signing their work. And here's the detail that gets me every time. Among the workers' graves, archaeologists found skeletons with healed broken bones, bones that had been set and cared for so they could mend. Someone looked after these workers when they were hurt. These were not nameless slaves. They were skilled, respected laborers, many of them farmers who came to build during the flood season when the fields were underwater and there was no farming to be done. Building the pyramid was a national project, and being part of it was an honor. One last wonder, the Great Pyramid isn't just big, it's precise. Its four sides are lined up almost perfectly with north, south, east, and west. The base is nearly a perfect square, level across an area bigger than several football fields, with errors smaller than the width of your thumb. How they used the sky. By watching the stars wheel around the night and the sun's shadow through the day, Egyptian surveyors could find true north and lay out perfect right angles with nothing but cords, stakes, and patience. They had no telescopes and no calculators. They had careful eyes, simple geometry, and an obsession with getting it right, because this wasn't just a building. It was a tomb. A pyramid was built to carry a pharaoh into the afterlife, a giant stairway and shelter for a king who was meant to become a god. That's why it had to be perfect and permanent and pointed at the heavens. And that's the real answer to our question. The pyramids weren't built by magic or by aliens or by misery. They were built by thousands of ordinary, well-fed, well-organized people, using the river, the sun, wet sand, and simple machines, guided by a handful of brilliant ideas and an entire kingdom pulling in the same direction. Stack a simple idea up 2 million times, and you get a wonder of the world. The smooth white casing is mostly gone now, stripped away over the centuries. But when it was new, the Great Pyramid would have blazed in the sun like a mountain of light, visible for miles. The first people to see it finished were looking at the tallest thing humans would build for nearly 4,000 years. It makes you wonder what we're building today that someone, thousands of years from now, will stand beneath and say, "How on earth did they do that?" If you ever wondered how we got here, you're in the right place. See you in the next one.